In the heart of America, where rolling fields meet open skies, a legacy of service and sacrifice has taken flight. This is the story of the Iowa Air National Guard. The story of citizen airmen, ordinary Iowans, who stood ready in extraordinary times and continue that tradition today. From humble beginnings in the early days of World War II to global missions in the 21st century, they have carried the spirit of the heartland into the skies. For more than 8 decades, the Iowa Air National Guard has defended freedom abroad, answered the call at home, and stood as a shield above the state they call their own. It is a legacy of vigilance, courage, and commitment. A legacy that has become a tradition that soars even higher today. The dream of an Iowa Air Squadron began in 1925, when World War I pilots from Iowa sought federal recognition. Their efforts failed 6 times, but the dream never faded, and finally, in May 1940, the National Guard Bureau offered Iowa an allocation. Governor George Wilson and Adjutant General Charles Grahl accepted, designating the Des Moines Municipal Airport as the fledgling unit's home. On February 9, 1941, Grahl appointed Major Lester Orcutt as the commander of the newly formed 124th Observation Squadron, with the primary duty of recruiting for his squadron. More than 300 Iowans stepped forward to serve. On February 25th, the squadron was federally recognized at the Des Moines Municipal Airport, marking the official birth of the Iowa Air National Guard. Just weeks later, on March 9th, the squadron received its very first aircraft, a BC-1A trainer. Though only a single plane, it marked the beginning of Iowa's journey into military aviation. By April 17th, the squadron expanded with the arrival of O-38E and O-47A observation aircraft. Built for reconnaissance, these planes gave the unit its first real sense that it had a mission: to watch the skies, report what they saw, and prepare for the storm of war that was fast approaching. On September 15, 1941, the 124th was called to federal service, bringing with it 27 officers, 110 enlisted men, and just 5 aircraft. Known as the Iowa Hawks, the squadron began with a 15-day indoctrination into full-time military life before moving to Sherman Army Airfield at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. From there, the unit was transferred to Ellington Field in Texas, where its mission shifted to anti-submarine patrols over the Gulf of Mexico. Later, the unit moved 35 miles south to Galveston, where they continued that mission as part of the Gulf Task Force. In November 1942, the squadron was redesignated the 124th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron and began serving as a replacement training squadron. Equipped with P-39s, P-40S, and a single P-51B. Members of the 124th prepared new pilots for combat overseas. Back in Iowa, on November 2, 1943, a new hangar was completed in Des Moines as the unit cemented its place at home, even as its airmen served abroad. On April 30, 1944, the 124th was officially retired from active service for the duration of the war. Their mission in World War II had ended, but for the Iowa Air National Guard, this was only the beginning of a much larger story. With World War II behind them, Iowa's airmen looked toward the future. On July 5, 1946, Governor Robert Blue appointed Colonel Lester G. Orcutt, the former commander of the 124th Observation Squadron, to lead the expansion of a new air arm for Iowa. That expansion was ambitious. It would include the 132nd Fighter Group, the 124th Fighter Squadron, and its headquarters detachment in Des Moines, Detachment A of the 232nd Air Service Group, a utility flight, and a weather station. Additional squadrons, including the 174th Fighter Squadron and an aircraft control and warning squadron, were organized at Sioux City. Later that year, on August 23rd, the 132nd Fighter Group, under the command of Colonel Ellis E. Eno, received federal recognition and became part of the 71st Fighter Wing, based in St. Louis, Missouri. On that same day, the 124th Fighter Squadron, led by Lieutenant Colonel William J. Filer, also gained recognition, along with its utility flight under Captain Roger Gilbert, and the 124th Weather Station under Captain Charles T. Height. A few weeks later, on September 6th, Detachment A of the 232nd Air Service Group, commanded by Captain Gerald Corrigan, one of the original members of the 124th Observation Squadron, was commissioned. At this time, the unit was only 40% manned. Captain Gilbert and Staff Sergeant Don Boo, another original member, launched an aggressive recruiting program for both World War II veterans and non-veterans alike. By 1948, the Iowa Guard had been reorganized into a fighter squadron equipped with F-51 Mustangs, and a year later, the unit was grouped under the newly formed 132nd Fighter Wing in Des Moines. From a dream that began in the 1920s, Iowa now had a fully recognized and modern Air National Guard, ready to meet the demands of a new era. The 1950s opened with the nation at war once again. On April 1st, 1951, the 124th Fighter Squadron was mobilized for federal service during the Korean conflict. Families and airmen relocated to Dow Air Force Base in Bangor, Maine, a post that had been deactivated since 1948 and required extensive rehabilitation before it could house the influx of guardsmen. Life there was challenging, with shortages of parts and aging equipment hampering flying operations. The squadron flew P-51 Mustangs, and later F-84B Thunderjets, as they trained and prepared for combat readiness. That winter, the Iowa Airmen braved some of the harshest conditions on record while participating in major exercises at Griffiss Air Force Base in New York. Appropriately named Exercise Snowfall and Operation Cold Spot, these drills tested both the aircraft and the men who flew them. The 124th packed up and moved back home to Iowa shortly after a ceasefire was declared in Korea, and the regular Air Force returned to the United States. By mid-decade, the Iowa Air National Guard entered a new chapter, one defined by modernization and competition. Transitioning to the more superior F-84E Thunderjet in 1956, the squadron's training tempo increased as they moved into the jet age. Annual training at Natrona County Airport in Casper, Wyoming, became a highlight of the era, with the local community embracing the guardsmen with warmth and hospitality. In 1957, preparations began for yet another leap forward: the arrival of the F-86L Sabre, an all-weather transonic interceptor. To support the new aircraft, the base in Des Moines expanded with new facilities, including a flight simulator, signaling Iowa's readiness for the most modern air defense mission of the Cold War. The Sioux City unit also reorganized, eventually becoming the 185th Fighter Bomber Squadron, which also flew various models of the Sabre. Together, the Des Moines and Sioux City units stood watch over the Midwest as part of America's Continental Air Defense Network, ready to scramble at a moment's notice against the threat of Soviet bombers. By the close of the 1950s, the Iowa Air National Guard had completed the transformation from operating propeller-driven fighters of the Second World War to the jets that would define America's air power for a new generation. As the 1960s began, the newly organized 132nd Air Defense Wing in Des Moines had matured into one of the top-rated units in the Air Defense Command. Flying the F-89 Scorpion, the wing maintained a demanding 24-hour runway alert, keeping its airmen on constant watch. Their excellence earned repeated recognition, with inspections and awards that placed the Iowa unit among the very best in the nation. Training was rigorous. Deployments to Volk Field in Wisconsin and live fire exercises at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida sharpened both pilots and crews. The 132nd also became a pioneer in the use of the SAGE data link system, helping to advance the nation's ability with command and control of jet interceptors against high-speed threats. On October 1st, 1962, the Sioux City Squadron was officially designated the 185th Tactical Fighter Group, laying the foundation for what would become Iowa's 2nd Air Guard Wing. From that point forward, Des Moines and Sioux City stood as twin pillars of the state's air power, each with its own aircraft, missions, and responsibilities. As the decade unfolded, the world changed, and so did the mission. In January 1968, the 185th was called to active federal service following the Pueblo crisis, marking one of the most significant activations in Iowa Air Guard history. The group was relocated to Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, though it existed largely as a paper unit. Its 174th Tactical Fighter Squadron, however, deployed to Phuket Air Base, South Vietnam, on May 11, 1968, joining the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing. Flying their F-100 Super Sabres, Sioux City's citizen airmen flew 6,539 combat sorties, totaling more than 11,000 hours in the skies over Southeast Asia. Their missions provided critical close air support and interdiction for U.S. and Allied ground forces. The 174th's performance earned the Presidential Unit Citation and the Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, while its members received an impressive tally of decorations, including 12 Silver Stars, 35 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 30 Bronze Stars, 115 Air Force Commendation Medals, 325 Air Medals, and 1 Purple Heart. Through heat, danger, and distance, the 185th's Airmen carried Iowa's spirit halfway across the world, proving that small-town resolve could meet global challenges with courage and precision. Back home, the 132nd prepared to transition into the supersonic age with the F-102 Delta Dagger. But in 1967, the changeover was canceled, and Iowa's airmen continued flying the F-89 longer than they expected. Even so, the unit excelled, earning an outstanding rating on its 1968 Operational Readiness Inspection. During that time period, new facilities were completed across the state that ended up supporting future growth, signaling the Iowa Air Guard's expanding role in safeguarding the nation. Though the 132nd remained committed to air defense through the decade, the 1960s ended with Iowa's airmen standing on the threshold of transformation, one that would soon carry them into tactical air command and putting its pilots in the jet fighters of a new generation. The 1970s brought sweeping changes for the Iowa Air National Guard. Both the 132nd in Des Moines and the 185th in Sioux City began the decade flying their F-100 Super Sabre. It was an aircraft held in high regard by Tactical Air Command, and Iowa's airmen proved themselves in that weapon system through the course of countless inspections and training exercises. By the mid-1970s, the Guard was fully integrated into the nation's total force concept, training and fighting alongside the active duty Air Force. In 1976, Iowa airmen deployed to Aviano Air Base in Italy for the NATO exercise Dashing Dodo. Just after their arrival, a powerful earthquake shook the region, killing hundreds. While the Iowa contingent was spared, the disaster underscored the real-world challenges faced during overseas operations. Other deployments carried Iowa aircraft to Howard Air Force Base in Panama, Misawa Air Base in Japan, and Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska for checkered flag exercises. These missions tested their ability of Iowa airmen to deploy anywhere in the world, side by side with NATO and U.S. forces. By the end of the decade, the F-100's long service was drawing to a close. In 1977, the 132nd transitioned to the A-7D Corsair II, with the 185th joining them in short order. For the first time, Iowa's two wings flew a standardized fleet, preparing them for global deployments while continuing their mission of service at home. Though much of the 1980s, the 132nd in Des Moines and the 185th in Sioux City flew the Corsair through much of the decade, mastering the close air support and strike missions for which it was designed. Iowa air crews deployed overseas to NATO exercises in Europe and trained across the United States, sharpening their edge as part of the nation's total force. In 1981, Sioux City's 185th began a new chapter when it received its first F-16A and F-16B Fighting Falcons, becoming one of the first Air Guard units in the nation to fly the advanced jet. Des Moines, however, remained with the A-7D throughout the decade, refining its mission and earning multiple outstanding unit awards. Throughout the 80s, both wings trained tirelessly at home and abroad. Iowa air crews deployed to Volk Field, Gulfport, Savannah, Shaw, Hill, Luke, Holloman, Tyndall, Hickam, and even Howard Air Base in Panama, demonstrating their readiness to operate anywhere in the world. By the end of the 1980s, the Iowa Air National Guard stood on the brink of transformation to its next phase of service. With new facilities completed in Des Moines and the F-16 already in service at Sioux City, both wings were preparing for a decade that would carry them from the skies of the Midwest to combat over Iraq. The 1990s began with Iowa airmen called into combat. In 1991, members of the 132nd and 185th deployed in support of Operation Desert Storm, flying missions over Iraq as the United States and its allies drove Saddam Hussein's forces from Kuwait. Even after the war ended, Iowa's mission in the Middle East continued. Both the 132nd and 185th supported Operation Provide Comfort and Operation Southern Watch, enforcing no-fly zones and protecting vulnerable populations in Iraq. Back home, major changes were underway. On October 16, 1992, the Sioux City unit was redesignated the 185th Fighter Wing, achieving full wing status as Iowa's second major air command. Throughout the 1990s, the 132nd and 185th stood side by side, flying the F-16 as their primary weapon system. The transition was still underway when disaster struck closer to home. In 1993, record-setting floods devastated Iowa communities, and the Guard once again turned its strength to relief missions, providing aid to those in need. Whether patrolling the skies over Iraq or helping neighbors recover from natural disasters, Iowa's airmen showed they were ready to serve whenever and wherever duty called. The new millennium brought both tragedy and transformation for the Iowa Air National Guard. On September 11, 2001, the nation was attacked, and Iowa's Air Guard was mobilized immediately. Members of the 132nd and 185th flew combat air patrols over American cities under Operation Noble Eagle, guarding the nation's skies in the days of shock and uncertainty that followed. The now-closed 133rd Test Squadron also assisted with the mission by pointing its sophisticated radar into the countryside to monitor for any further threats. In the years after 9/11, the mission expanded overseas. The 132nd deployed its F-16s into combat over Iraq and Afghanistan, striking enemy positions and protecting U.S. and coalition forces on the ground during Operation Global Freedom. These deployments became a regular rhythm, with Iowa airmen serving on the front lines of the global war on terror. For Sioux City, the decade brought a dramatic change in mission. In 2003, the 185th transitioned from the F-16 to the KC-135 Stratotanker. With this new-to-them aircraft, the 185th became a vital link in America's global aerial refueling network, enabling U.S. and Allied aircraft to fly farther, stay longer, and reach anywhere they were needed. Throughout the decade, Iowa's airmen also responded at home. Whether fighting floods, ice storms, or tornadoes, the 132nd and 185th balanced their overseas combat missions with service to their communities. By the close of the 2000s, the Iowa Air National Guard had become more global in reach and broader in mission than ever before, defending America's skies, fueling the nation's combat power, and serving both home and abroad in a time of war. The 2010s marked the end of one era and the beginning of another for the Iowa Air National Guard. On September 7, 2013, the 132nd Fighter Wing flew its final F-16 training sorties. That same month, thousands of airmen, retirees, and families gathered at Des Moines for a celebration of flight, honoring 75 years of manned flying in the Iowa Air Guard. The flyovers and ceremonies closed the book on Iowa's long fighter tradition. In October, the unit stood up entirely new missions. The 132nd established intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations, launched remotely piloted aircraft units, and expanded into cyber defense. From dogfights to data, the mission had changed, but the call to serve remained the same. Between 2005 and 2013, the wing had flown nearly 2,000 combat sorties, accruing almost 8,000 flight hours, completing 99% of its missions before handing off its fighter role. Meanwhile, in Sioux City, the 185th carried forward Iowa's tradition of global reach with the KC-135 Stratotanker. From the Middle East to Europe and beyond, its air crews fueled America's combat power, keeping strike and transport aircraft in the fight. The decade marked a cultural transformation for Iowa's Air Guard. What began in 1941 as a fighter squadron in Des Moines had evolved into a dual mission. One wing pioneering global intelligence and cyber operations, the other sustaining worldwide air mobility. Together, they stood as proof that the Iowa Air National Guard could adapt to meet the needs of any era. Today, the Iowa Air National Guard continues to stand on two wings. In Des Moines, the 132nd Wing leads cutting-edge missions in intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, cyber defense, and flies the remotely piloted MQ-9 Reaper. Its airmen work around the clock, providing information and support that help shape operations across the globe. In Sioux City, the 185th Air Refueling Wing continues to maintain its KC-135 Stratotanker fleet, allowing them to extend the reach of U.S. and Allied aircraft with aerial refueling. Whether sustaining fighters, bombers, or transport aircraft, the 185th, remains a critical link in the projection of America's global power. For more than 8 decades, from the first flight of the 124th Observation Squadron up to today, the Iowa Air National Guard has carried the spirit of the heartland into the skies. From the early days of World War II to today's missions of global reach and cyber defense, their role has evolved with the missions it has been assigned, but their purpose has never changed. Generations of citizen airmen, alongside their families and communities, continue to stand watch with courage, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve, upholding the legacy of those that came before them. The aircraft may be different, the missions more complex, yet the mission remains the same: to safeguard the homeland, serve our communities, and to execute global operations. This is Iowa's story. This is America's story. This is the Iowa Air National Guard. Always there, always ready,